I knew my marriage was finished the instant I detected the scent. A spicy, expensive aftershave that clung to my wife's hair like invisible evidence of her deception. Standing in our bedroom doorway, I watched Rebecca hurriedly adjusting her blazer, her back turned to me, oblivious to my presence. 6 years of marriage, and it had led to this moment, this silent, crushing realization that would alter everything. I picked up dinner, I said quietly, my voice more controlled than I felt. Thai curry from that place you love. She spun around, startled, her green eyes widening before quickly narrowing. No remorse there, just annoyance at being discovered. Marcus, I didn't hear you come in. She ran fingers through her tousled blonde hair. I'm exhausted. I need to wash up. I took a step toward her. One simple, hopeful step. Perhaps there was an explanation. Perhaps this wasn't what it appeared to be. Don't come near me, Marcus, she said coldly, backing away as if I were a threat. I said I'm exhausted. 5 words that destroyed my world. 5 words that confirmed everything I'd been trying to ignore. I could have screamed, could have demanded answers, could have hurled accusations and shattered things. Instead, I studied her, truly studied her, memorizing the face of the woman I thought I understood. Then I turned and walked away in silence. That was 8 months ago. Now I stand at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my high-rise apartment, watching the city lights dance on the bay's dark surface. My phone vibrates against the marble countertop behind me. Rebecca's name illuminates the screen for the 6th time today. I let it roll to voicemail, just like the other 5 calls. Just like the dozens of calls from recent weeks, just like the desperate emails and messages that have flooded in since she discovered what I'd accomplished. She wants to explain. Claims she made a catastrophic mistake. Says she regrets everything. But I learned years ago that actions reveal more than words, and my actions over these past months have spoken volumes. Hashtag the beginning. I met Rebecca Chen at a venture capital summit in Austin 6 years ago. I was presenting research on predictive analytics for renewable energy systems, dense material for most audiences, but revolutionary in certain investment circles. She worked for Meridian Ventures, one of those high-energy firms with exposed brick offices and kombucha stations in every kitchen. The kind that burns through capital like wildfire and pivots quarterly. After my presentation, most attendees asked standard questions about market penetration or scalability metrics. Not Rebecca. She approached with a confident smile and extended her manicured hand. Your algorithm could transform the entire renewable sector, but your pitch made it sound about as thrilling as reading tax code, she said, her green eyes meeting mine directly. You need better storytelling if you want investors to actually write checks. I should have been offended. Instead, I found myself smiling back. And I suppose you're the person to provide that storytelling? I could be, she shrugged elegantly. Over dinner, perhaps. We were married 7 months later. Some people warned it was too fast. My sister Kate cautioned me that I barely knew her. But when something feels right, you don't question it, or so I thought. Her marketing brilliance complemented my technical expertise. Her social ease balanced my analytical nature. Together, we seemed unstoppable. 1 year into our marriage, we founded Quantum Solutions. The concept was straightforward. I developed predictive analytics software for renewable energy companies, and Rebecca transformed complex algorithms into compelling investment narratives that venture capitalists could understand. Our first office was Rebecca's converted garage in our modest Austin townhouse. Our first client was a small solar installation company that took a chance on us based on Rebecca's persuasive presentation. Within 4 years, we employed 90 people, operated from a sleek downtown office with a view of Lady Bird Lake, and served some of the largest renewable energy firms in the Southwest. We bought a house in Westlake Hills where tech executives and successful entrepreneurs lived. I drove a practical Model S, Rebecca chose a white Porsche Macan. In our 3-car garage sat my weekend project, a vintage motorcycle I was restoring. Success arrived so rapidly that I sometimes questioned its reality. Rebecca would curl against me in our California king bed, her breathing soft and rhythmic, and I'd think, this is what achievement feels like. This is what winning looks like. I was naive. Hashtag the changes. The initial changes were subtle enough to miss. Rebecca began working later, claiming investor meetings ran long. Our evening conversations, once filled with excited planning for Quantum's future, became shorter and more perfunctory. She started taking business trips to San Francisco and New York, trips I wasn't invited to join. It's just presentations to potential investors, she'd say, packing designer clothes into her leather suitcase. You'd find it mind-numbing. Perhaps I should have questioned it then, but I was occupied developing a new analytics module that could potentially triple our client base. And I trusted her completely, the way you're supposed to trust your wife, your business partner, your closest friend. The biggest opportunity in our company's history materialized in the form of Apex Energy, a regional giant with 12 facilities across Texas and New Mexico. Landing them as a client would transform Quantum from successful startup to industry leader. Rebecca took point on the negotiations, working closely with their new VP of Strategy, David Sterling. Sterling embodied everything I wasn't. Tall, conventionally attractive, with the easy confidence that comes from an Ivy League MBA and a career built on relationships rather than substance. He'd joined Apex from McKinsey, bringing a reputation as a transformation specialist and efficiency expert. The first time I met him at our offices, I noticed how his gaze lingered on Rebecca longer than appropriate. I noticed how she laughed more brightly at his comments. But I dismissed these observations as paranoia. Rebecca was naturally charming with everyone, it was what made her so effective. David believes we can close this deal by month end, she told me one evening, her face illuminated by her laptop screen as we worked in our home office. He's convinced the CEO that our system will reduce their operational costs by at least 30%. That's incredible, I replied, looking up from my own computer. We should celebrate this weekend. Maybe take that trip to Fredericksburg you mentioned. She didn't look up. I can't this weekend. I have to meet with David and their technical team in Houston. Their CTO has concerns about integration. I could come along, I offered. Integration questions are more my area anyway. She finally glanced up, her expression unreadable. No need. I've got it covered. Don't you have that module to finish? I did, so I didn't press further. Hashtag the night everything changed. The night of the cologne and the cold words, I had returned home early. The module was complete, testing flawlessly. I'd stopped at Central Market for fresh ingredients, then picked up a bottle of the Burgundy we brought back from our anniversary trip to Sonoma the previous year. I prepared her favorite dish, pan-seared salmon with lemon risotto, set the dining room table with the Waterford crystal we rarely used, and waited. Her text arrived at 7:45 p.m., meeting running late. Don't wait up. But I did wait. And when she finally came home at 9:15, it wasn't from any meeting. The smudged lipstick, the wrinkled blouse, the unfamiliar cologne, they told a different story entirely. After she dismissed me with those devastating 5 words, I spent the night in my home office, staring at the ceiling, calculating my next move with the same methodical precision I applied to algorithm development. By dawn, I had a plan. Not to save my marriage, that possibility had evaporated the moment I smelled another man's cologne on my wife. No, this was a strategy to protect what I'd built, what I'd earned, what belonged to me. Hashtag the strategy. The next morning, I didn't confront Rebecca. I didn't demand explanations or apologies. Instead, I smiled over breakfast, accepted her weak excuse about being exhausted the night before, and kissed her cheek as if nothing had happened. "Have a productive day," I said as she left for the office. "I'll be working from home today." Finalizing the new module. As soon as her Porsche disappeared down our tree-lined street, I began my investigation. First, I accessed her calendar, something I could do as company co-founder. The supposed meeting with Apex had ended at 5 p.m. according to the schedule. Where had she been for the next 4 hours? I reviewed our corporate credit card statements. No restaurant charges, no hotel rooms, nothing unusual. Next, I examined recent emails between Rebecca and David Sterling. Most were professional, discussing contract terms and implementation schedules, but there were occasional phrases that seemed oddly personal, inside jokes I wasn't part of. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but enough to confirm my suspicions. The final proof came from our phone records. Dozens of calls between Rebecca and the same number, Sterling's personal cell, not his office line. Many late at night or on weekends, some lasting over an hour. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, a strange calm settling over me. Now I knew. Now I could act. I contacted Harrison Webb, a corporate attorney I'd met through our country club. We arranged to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop in Cedar Park, away from our usual business circles. "I need to restructure my company," I told him after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "Completely legally, but with maximum protection for certain assets." Harrison studied me over his espresso, his gray eyebrows lifting slightly. "Problems with a business partner?" "Let's call it prudent planning for potential contingencies," I replied evenly. "What can be done without requiring a co-owner's signature?" He didn't push for details, which is why I'd chosen him. Harrison was discreet, ethical, but pragmatic. "Bring me your operating agreement and corporate bylaws," he said. "We'll see what options exist. Hashtag the restructuring." That meeting initiated an intricate 4-month strategy. I executed it meticulously, patiently, never revealing my true motivations to anyone, least of all to Rebecca. The first phase involved creating a new entity, Nexus IP Holdings. As the developer of our core algorithms, I had certain intellectual property rights that weren't clearly addressed in our hastily drafted original agreement. With Harrison's guidance, I legally transferred ownership of our software's core engine to Nexus, a company solely owned by me. Quantum would continue using the software, but now under a licensing agreement that could be modified or terminated. The second phase required more finesse. We had a minor investor, Patricia Huang, who owned 12% of Quantum. I approached her with an offer to purchase her shares at a substantial premium using my personal savings. The transaction gave me 51% ownership, a controlling interest that Rebecca never saw coming. The third and most complex phase involved restructuring Quantum itself. We split it into 2 entities. Quantum Consulting, which would handle client relations and implementation, and Quantum Development, focused on creating new products and features. On paper, the restructuring was presented as a tax optimization strategy. In reality, it ensured that Rebecca remained a 49% owner of Quantum Consulting, which represented only about 30% of our business's total value, while I controlled the rest. All of this happened right under Rebecca's nose. She signed documents without reading the fine print, trusting that I was handling the mundane legal matters as I always had. Meanwhile, the Apex contract negotiation continued, with Rebecca and David Sterling spending increasing amounts of time together in private meetings. Throughout this process, a peculiar sense of clarity guided my actions. The emotional devastation of Rebecca's betrayal had crystallized into something else entirely, a cold, precise focus that allowed me to think several moves ahead at all times. It reminded me of the mental state I'd enter when coding complex algorithms, a flow state where emotion receded and pure logic prevailed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rebecca's betrayal had wounded me deeply, yet it had also freed me from emotional constraints that might have otherwise limited my response. I maintained the perfect facade of an oblivious, trusting husband. I brought home flowers. I asked about her day. I even planned a romantic weekend in San Antonio where we walked along the river walk and discussed everything except the truth hanging between us like a sword. While she betrayed our marriage, I was systematically dismantling our business partnership. We were both liars now, both betrayers in our own ways. The difference was that her betrayal was driven by passion or boredom or whatever compels someone to cheat. Mine was calculated, methodical, and completely legal. Hashtag the contract and the confrontation. By the time the Apex contract was finally signed, a $15 million deal that would indeed transform our company, my preparations were complete. The celebration dinner at Austin's most exclusive restaurant was a masterclass in deception on both our parts. Rebecca played the role of devoted wife and brilliant co-founder, accepting congratulations from employees and clients alike. I played the role of proud husband, raising toasts to my incredible wife without whom none of this would be possible. David Sterling was there too, representing Apex. He maintained professional distance from Rebecca during the formal part of the evening, but I noticed them both disappear around the same time during the cocktail hour. When they returned separately, Rebecca's lipstick was freshly applied and Sterling's tie was slightly askew. It was almost amusing how obvious they were, how secure they felt in their deception. They had no idea what was coming. That night, as we drove home in silence, Rebecca finally spoke the words I'd been waiting for. "Marcus, we need to talk." I pulled into our driveway, turned off the engine, and faced her with a neutral expression. "About what?" She took a deep breath, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I'm not happy. I haven't been for a while." I waited, saying nothing, forcing her to fill the silence. "You're a good man," she continued, not meeting my eyes. "And what we've built together is amazing, but something's missing for me. I think I need some time apart. Is there someone else?" I asked quietly, already knowing the answer. Her head snapped up, surprise and guilt flashing across her face. "Why would you ask that?" "Just a question," I replied with a slight shrug. "Is there?" She hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes. It just happened. I didn't plan it." "David Sterling?" Another flash of surprise. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter," I cut her off. "What matters is what happens now." "What do you want, Rebecca?" She seemed thrown by my calm reaction, perhaps expecting tears or rage. I think I want to try being with him. See if it's real." I nodded as if we were discussing a minor business decision. Okay, she echoed incredulously. "That's it? What do you want me to say?" "That I'll fight for you, beg you to stay." I looked at her directly, my voice steady. "We're adults. You've made your choice. What about the company?" she asked, her practical side emerging even in this moment of personal upheaval. "We'll figure it out," I said vaguely. "One thing at a time." That night, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, Rebecca packed a suitcase, claiming she was going to stay with her friend Sarah to clear her head. I knew she was going straight to David Sterling's downtown condo, but I said nothing, just wished her well with the same detached pleasantness I might offer a casual acquaintance. As soon as she left, I called Harrison Webb and set the final phase of my plan in motion. Hashtag the revelation. For the next 3 weeks, I focused entirely on work, expanding Quantum's reach and solidifying our new organizational structure. I declined calls from mutual friends wanting to know what was happening with Rebecca and me. I avoided the usual social spots where I might be subjected to pitying looks or awkward questions. During this time, I also accelerated development on our next-generation platform, something I'd been conceptualizing for months but hadn't yet prioritized. I pulled our best engineers into a specialized team operating out of a separate office space, reporting directly to me. The project consumed my days and nights, providing not just a strategic business advantage but also a welcome distraction from personal turmoil. When Rebecca finally reached out to discuss our situation, I suggested meeting at a neutral location. A coffee shop in the domain, equidistant from our office and Sterling's apartment. She looked different when she arrived. Her hair was styled in a sleek new cut I'd never seen before. Her outfit was more expensive looking than her usual business attire. Sterling's influence, no doubt. But what struck me most was the confident smile she wore as she approached my table, the smile of someone who thought they controlled the situation. "Marcus," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thank you for meeting me. You look well." "So do you," I replied truthfully. "Happiness suits you." She had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. "Look, I know this is difficult, and I'm sorry for how everything happened, but I think we can handle this maturely, don't you?" "Of course," I agreed, sipping my Americano. "That's why I'm here." "Good." She relaxed visibly. "I've been thinking about the company. Obviously, we need to figure out some kind of arrangement." "What did you have in mind?" I asked, curious to hear what she thought she was entitled to. "Well, we built Quantum together," she said, leaning forward earnestly. "I think the fairest thing would be a clean split, 50-50. I'd step back from day-to-day operations, of course, since that would be awkward, but I'd retain my ownership stake." I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this entirely reasonable proposal. "And what does David think of this arrangement?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "This isn't about David. This is about us, our company." "Of course," I conceded. "But I imagine you've discussed it with him, given that you're living together now." She flushed. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter," I said for the second time. "And you're right. This is about our company, which is why I've taken the liberty of preparing some documents." I reached into my briefcase and withdrew a thick folder, sliding it across the table to her. "This outlines the current corporate structure of Quantum and its related entities, along with a fair market buyout offer for your shares." She frowned, opening the folder and beginning to scan the contents. I watched as confusion, then disbelief, then anger crossed her face in rapid succession. "What is this?" she demanded, holding up a diagram showing the relationship between Quantum Consulting, Quantum Development, and Nexus IP Holdings. "When did this happen?" "Over the past few months," I replied calmly. "You signed the authorization papers yourself. It was part of our tax optimization strategy, remember? I never authorized splitting the company like this." "Actually, you did. Page 18 of the April filing, Section 4. Your signature is at the bottom." She frantically flipped through the documents until she found the page in question, staring at her own signature as if it were a forgery. "It wasn't. This is perfectly legal," I finished for her. "As is the new ownership structure. As you can see, you retained 49% ownership of Quantum Consulting, which manages our client relationships and implementation services. But what about the software, the intellectual property?" Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. "That's held by Nexus IP Holdings, which licenses it to both Quantum entities. The licensing fees account for approximately 70% of our total revenue stream. And let me guess," she said bitterly. "I don't own any part of Nexus." "No," I confirmed. As the sole developer of the core algorithms, I established Nexus to protect those specific assets. Again, completely legal under our operating agreement. Her face had gone pale. And quantum development? I own 100% of that entity, which now employs most of our development team and creates all new products and features. She sat back, the full picture finally coming into focus. You planned this from the moment you found out about David. You've been planning this. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I protected what was mine. Half of quantum is mine, she insisted, her voice trembling with rage. We built it together. You can't just restructure everything without my knowledge. But I didn't, I pointed out. You signed every document. You had every opportunity to read them, to question them. You chose not to because you trusted me. The irony of her statement hung in the air between us. I let it linger for a moment before responding. Yes. And I trusted you. She flinched as if I'd struck her. The buyout offer for your shares of Quantum Consulting is fair, I continued. More than fair, actually. It's based on an independent valuation conducted last month. You'll find the full report in the folder. This is wrong, she whispered, tears forming in her green eyes. Ethically wrong. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But we're well past ethical high ground, aren't we? She wiped at her eyes angrily. I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. You're welcome to try, I said, gathering my things and standing. But everything was done by the book. You might tie things up in court for a while, but you'll spend a fortune in legal fees with no guarantee of success. And of course, all the details of why our partnership dissolved would become public record. The color drained further from her face as the implications sank in. Her affair with a major client's executive becoming public knowledge would devastate her professional reputation, something she'd always guarded jealously. I hadn't explicitly threatened to expose her, but I didn't need to. She was intelligent enough to connect the dots. Take some time to think it over, I suggested, my voice softening slightly, not out of compassion, but because I knew a gentler approach would be more effective now. The offer is generous, Rebecca. You could start fresh, build something new. Isn't that what you want? I placed a business card on top of the folder. That's my attorney's contact information. The offer stands for 2 weeks. I suggest you get your own lawyer to review it. Someone good. Someone expensive. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at her tear-streaked face. For what it's worth, I really did love you, Rebecca. Every day of our marriage. She didn't respond, just stared at the documents that detailed exactly how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered her. I walked out of the coffee shop into the bright Austin afternoon, feeling neither triumph nor regret, just a calm certainty that I'd done what needed to be done. ## the aftermath. Over the next few days, I ignored Rebecca's increasingly desperate calls and texts. I knew she'd been consulting with attorneys, expensive ones, based on the names I heard through industry gossip. I also knew what they were telling her, that while what I'd done was ethically questionable, it was legally bulletproof. On the 6th day after our coffee shop meeting, I received an unexpected text from Elena Rodriguez, a former client who now worked in the same building as Apex Energy. Thought you should know. Just saw Rebecca and Sterling having a massive argument in the parking garage. She was crying. He was yelling something about damaged goods and not what I signed up for. Sorry, man. Rough situation all around. I wasn't surprised. David Sterling had pursued Rebecca at least partly because of her status as a successful tech entrepreneur with a valuable company stake. Now that her stake was worth a fraction of what he'd anticipated, I imagined his ardor had cooled considerably. The next morning, Rebecca called again. This time, I answered. "I'll take the buyout," she said without preamble, her voice flat and defeated. "I'll have the papers drawn up," I replied. "Marcus." Her voice softened, a hint of the woman I'd once loved breaking through. Could we meet one more time? To sign everything in person? I think we deserve that much, at least." I hesitated. Part of me wanted clean closure, no more meetings, no more painful conversations. But another part recognized that 6 years of marriage shouldn't end via courier service. "All right," I agreed finally. "Where?" "Josephine House," she suggested, naming the little French restaurant where I'd proposed to her half a decade earlier. 7 o'clock. "I'll be there." ## final meeting. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same warm lighting, same scent of herbs and wine in the air. Rebecca was already seated at our old corner table when I arrived, her eyes fixed on a glass of red wine. She looked up as I approached, and I was struck by how fragile she appeared. The confident, polished woman from the coffee shop was gone, replaced by someone who seemed smaller, somehow diminished. "You came," she said, a note of relief in her voice. I said I would. I sat across from her, declining the wine list the waiter offered. "Just water for me. I'm driving." We ordered coco vin for her, duck confit for me, and then sat in awkward silence until the food arrived. I noticed she was no longer wearing her wedding ring. Mine had been off for months. "I've been staying with Sarah," she said finally, pushing food around her plate. "Actually staying with her this time. Not, you know." I nodded, not particularly interested in the details of her living arrangements. "David and I are over," she continued, looking up to gauge my reaction. When I offered none, she pressed on. "He changed when he found out about the company situation. Suddenly, he was talking about financial compatibility, and how he needed a partner who matched his ambitions." "Sounds like a charming guy," I remarked dryly. "You really know how to pick them." She flinched but didn't argue. "I deserve that." "You deserved better than him," I said, surprising myself with the admission. "But that was your choice to make." "I made a lot of bad choices," she said, setting down her fork, her food barely touched. "Do you want to know the stupidest one?" I waited, saying nothing. The stupidest choice wasn't starting something with David. It was not talking to you when I started feeling unhappy. Not giving our marriage a chance to be fixed. "Why didn't you?" I asked, genuinely curious. It was the one question that had haunted me through all of this. She shook her head slowly. "I don't know. Fear, maybe. Of confrontation. Of finding out that the problem wasn't our marriage, but me. Or maybe just taking the easy way out." She looked directly at me, her green eyes swimming with tears. "That night when you came home early and I said those awful things to you, 'Don't come near me, Marcus,' I saw the hurt in your eyes, and instead of stopping right there and telling you the truth, I just kept lying. Kept hurting you." I felt a tightness in my chest. Not the sharp pain of fresh betrayal, but an echo of it. A ghost of what I'd felt that night. "And now I've lost everything," she continued. "You, the company, my self-respect. All for what? For a man who only wanted what I could give him, not who I actually was." "You haven't lost everything," I said quietly. "You're still the same brilliant marketer who helped build Quantum from nothing. That talent is yours. No one can take it away." She smiled sadly. "Always looking for the silver lining. That's what I loved about you." "Not optimism," I corrected. "Realism. You're resilient, Rebecca. You always have been. You'll rebuild." We ate in silence for a while, the weight of all that had happened and all that could have been hanging between us. When the check came, she reached for it. "Please," she said when I started to object. "Let me do this one last thing." I nodded, not arguing. Outside, the night was warm, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air as we stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready for the final goodbye. "You know," she said after a long moment, "part of me hoped you would confront me that night. That you'd yell and demand explanations, force me to face what I was doing. And instead, I walked away without saying a word," I replied. "That was worse," she admitted. "Much worse, because it showed how deeply I'd hurt you." She reached out hesitantly, touching my cheek with cool fingers, the first physical contact between us in months. "I'm sorry, Marcus. For everything." I covered her hand with mine briefly, allowing myself one moment of connection before gently removing it. "I know," I said simply. Then I stepped back, creating distance between us again. "Goodbye, Rebecca." I turned and walked away without looking back, her whispered, "Goodbye, Marcus," floating after me on the night air. ## moving forward. The final papers were signed through our respective attorneys the following week. Rebecca took the buyout, a substantial sum that would allow her to start over somewhere new. I heard through mutual connections that she moved to Denver a month later to start her own marketing consultancy. As for me, I threw myself into expanding Quantum. We opened offices in Phoenix, Denver, and Dallas within the year. The Apex contract led to others, bigger ones, with energy companies across the Southwest. David Sterling, I learned, was terminated from Apex after an internal audit revealed questionable financial practices. Apparently, I wasn't the only one he tried to manipulate. The fallout from Sterling's dismissal was swift and devastating. The audit had uncovered a pattern of inflated consulting fees, questionable vendor relationships, and evidence that he'd been planning to leave Apex and poach key clients for his own venture. Industry circles in Austin aren't large. Word spread quickly. His reputation in ruins, Sterling found himself essentially unemployable in Texas. Last I heard, he'd taken a significantly lower position with a struggling company in Phoenix, a humiliating step down for someone who'd once navigated executive suites with such confidence. I took no satisfaction in his downfall. It felt less like justice and more like the natural consequence of character flaws that would have eventually caught up with him regardless. The man who had so casually invaded my marriage had destroyed himself through his own greed and arrogance. I sold our Westlake Hills house, too many memories, and bought a modern penthouse overlooking Town Lake. I traveled more, first for business, then simply for pleasure. I visited places Rebecca and I had talked about going someday but never found the time for. One unremarkable Thursday, 18 months after our divorce was finalized, I received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Denver Business Journal, a profile of the region's top marketing entrepreneurs. My photo was prominently featured alongside a headline, "From Algorithms to Empire, Marcus Chen Reshapes Energy Analytics." In the margin, written in familiar handwriting, was a simple note, "You deserve this recognition. Sorry for everything. R." I studied it for a long time, then carefully folded it and placed it in my desk drawer. Not displayed, not discarded, just another artifact from a closed chapter. That evening, I stood on my penthouse balcony, watching the city lights shimmer on the dark water below. I thought about choices and consequences, about the paths we take and the ones we abandon. She had said, "Don't come near me, Marcus." I had left without saying a word. And now she regretted everything. But the truth is, regret is part of the human condition. We all carry it in some form, for words spoken in anger, for love not protected, for opportunities not seized. I raised my whiskey glass in a silent toast to the glittering city. To moving forward, I whispered to the night air. To never looking back. But even as I spoke the words, some part of me knew they weren't entirely true. Because some memories, both sweet and bitter, stay with us forever. They shape us, change us, define who we become. And perhaps that's the true irony of life. Sometimes what you regret most isn't what you lost, but what you gained in its place. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. I'm in Austin for a conference next week. Coffee? Just to catch up. No agenda. I stared at the message for a long time before finally typing a response. Sorry, too busy. It was a lie, of course. I wasn't too busy, but some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Some wounds, even healed, shouldn't be reopened. She texted back almost immediately, I understand. Take care of yourself, Marcus. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. That night, I dreamed of her for the first time in months. Not Rebecca as she was at the end, tearful and regretful in that French restaurant, but Rebecca as she was in the beginning, laughing as we unpacked boxes in our first tiny office, triumphant as we landed our first major client, radiant as she walked toward me on our wedding day. I woke before dawn, the ghost of her smile still lingering in my mind. For a moment, just a moment, I allowed myself to wonder what might have happened if she had spoken up about her unhappiness, if I had noticed the signs earlier, if we had fought for what we built together instead of against each other. But maybes and what-ifs are a fool's game. Reality is what happened, not what might have been. I got up, made coffee, and sat at my computer to review the latest expansion plans for Quantum. By the time the sun rose over the hill country, casting golden light across the city, I was fully immersed in work, the dream fading like morning mist. Life moves forward even when parts of us remain tethered to the past. That's the paradox of loss. It never completely leaves you, but you learn to carry it differently as time passes. Less like an open wound, more like a scar that occasionally aches when the weather changes. 8 months later, I was in San Francisco for a technology conference when I saw her. I was crossing the hotel lobby toward the elevator when I glimpsed a familiar profile at the hotel bar. Blonde hair now styled differently. Elegant posture I would recognize anywhere. I could have slipped away unnoticed. Should have, probably. Instead, I found myself walking toward her. Rebecca. She turned, surprise flickering across her face before settling into a cautious smile. Marcus. I heard you might be here. Industry gossip travels fast. It does, I remarked, gesturing to the empty stool beside her. Mind if I join you? She hesitated for only a second. Please. I sat, ordering a Macallan neat from the bartender. Up close, she looked good, healthy, rested. Her green eyes were clear and bright. She wore a simple navy dress that I didn't recognize, a thin silver necklace at her throat. How's your conference going? She asked, sipping what looked like a gin and tonic. The usual. Lots of talk about AI revolutionizing everything. Some of it might even be true. I shrugged. You're not attending? No, I'm here for a client meeting. My firm is handling the rebranding for a local biotech startup. She smiled slightly. Apparently, I've developed a reputation for making complex scientific concepts understandable to normal humans. You always had that gift, I acknowledged. How is the new company going? Growing. We're up to 15 people now, specializing in tech and biotech marketing. She turned her glass slowly. Nothing on the scale of Quantum, but it's mine. Built from scratch. Congratulations. Thank you. She glanced at me. And Quantum? Though I hardly need to ask. I see the articles. You're everywhere these days. Expansion continues. We're moving into the Pacific Northwest next quarter. I always knew you'd do amazing things, she said softly. Even without me. The statement hung between us, laden with unspoken meanings. I took a sip of my scotch, letting the burn distract me from the sudden tightness in my chest. We both moved on, I said finally. Built new lives. Yes, she looked down at her drink, though some things are harder to rebuild than others. I knew she wasn't talking about business. We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for a moment, the ambient noise of the hotel bar washing over us. Then she straightened, as if coming to a decision. I never properly apologized to you, Marcus. Not really. I said I was sorry, but I never truly acknowledged the depth of what I did. You don't need to. I do. She interrupted firmly. I betrayed you not just as a wife, but as a partner in every sense of the word. We built something extraordinary together, and I risked it all for nothing. For a fleeting feeling that wasn't even real. I studied her face, searching for the manipulation I might once have suspected. I found only sincerity. What do you want from me, Rebecca? Forgiveness? Absolution? She shook her head. No, I don't expect either. I just want you to know that I understand now what I threw away. And that I've learned from it. Painful lessons, but necessary ones. Well, I said after a moment, we all make mistakes. Some bigger than others. She smiled wryly. True. I finished my scotch and signaled for the check. I should get going. Early presentation tomorrow. She nodded, a flash of disappointment crossing her face. Of course. I paid for both our drinks despite her protests, then stood to leave. It was good seeing you, Rebecca. I mean that. You too. She looked up at me, her expression open and unguarded. Maybe next time you're in Denver, or I'm in Austin. I knew what she was asking, and I also knew my answer wouldn't be what she hoped for. I don't think that would be a good idea, I said gently. Some chapters are better left closed. She absorbed this with remarkable composure, only a slight tightening of her fingers around her glass betraying her disappointment. I understand. Take care of yourself, Marcus. You too. I walked away, feeling her eyes on my back as I crossed the lobby toward the elevators. I didn't look back. Some goodbyes are best left final. That night in my hotel room overlooking the bay, I thought about second chances and whether some betrayals cut too deep to ever be truly forgiven. I thought about the woman I'd once loved with all my heart, sitting alone at that bar with her regrets and her new beginning. I didn't call her, didn't text. Some doors should remain closed, even when part of you wonders what lies on the other side. The next morning, as I prepared for my presentation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown San Francisco number. You were right. Some chapters should stay closed, but I'm glad we had one final paragraph. Wishing you continued success and happiness. You deserve both. R. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding, not out of anger or bitterness, but because there was nothing left to say. We had both said our pieces, written our endings to the story we once shared. She had said, "Don't come near me, Marcus." I had left without saying a word. And yes, perhaps now she regretted everything. But life isn't about avoiding regrets. It's about learning from them, growing from them, becoming stronger in the broken places. As I stood before a room of industry leaders later that morning, confidently presenting Quantum's vision for the future of energy analytics, I realized something important. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you exactly where you need to be. I had built something lasting, something meaningful, something entirely mine. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. That's the thing about betrayal. It either breaks you or forges you into something stronger. I chose the latter. And looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. Not even those 5 cold words that changed everything.